Good morning, Watershed. Man, it's so good to see people like in 3D. It's good to be able to talk to you a little bit, at least see some eyes, and just to have space, give you all in the room, and just the energy that creates. Thank you for being here. Thank you for going out of your way to share your morning with us. If you didn't listen to last week's talk, I really encourage you to, just because Sean did a great job sort of summarizing where the series is going in terms of who Joseph Campbell is in the hero's journey and what's behind all of it. I think it's a kind of a helpful piece for you to get your head wrapped around in terms of what the series is looking like. This morning, if I may, I'd like to take you on a journey, a little bit of maybe my own journey, maybe the journey of some of you in the space. And I think at least for myself these days, I find I am constantly looking for metaphor or image or ideas that help me interpret how I engage faith. I think growing up, I was told there's a definitive way in terms of what faith looks like, and I think there's some good truth to it. I think there was some meaning to it, but I think it also left us maybe, at least wanting a little bit, because I think our human psyche is longing for containers and grids and filters for which we articulate our connection with the divine. Some of you might do it through what's saving you. Some of you might experience it through music. Some of you might experience it through art or creativity or poetry or whatever it might be. And I think the hero's journey, which is a common narrative archetype, a story template that involves a hero who goes on an adventure, learns a lesson, wins a victory with that newfound knowledge, then returns home transformed. That story that's a sort of a modern day. It's what Joseph Campbell calls the hero's journey. But that is not just unique to modern day, right? That's arguably, like what Sean said last week, it's a deeply Jewish or Christian narrative, or Hindu or Muslim narrative for that matter. And there's the villain, there's the hero, and there's a changed and transformed person. But I think what we've often done is we've looked at the scriptures, like the Adams and the Eves versus this sort of proverbial serpent, or the Joseph versus the Pharaohs, or Noah and the flood sort of versus the whole world dying and Noah supposedly surviving, or Jonah and this big fish. And we find ourselves getting caught up in these stories, and I think fundamentally asking the wrong questions. We begin sort of inquiring, well, are these stories true? And if they're true, then what's it mean to live in the belly of a fish for 3 days? Like, that's crazy, right? Of course it's not a true story. He didn't really live in a fish belly for 3 days. Did David really kill Goliath? I don't know. Is it possible that a little guy could kill some tall, beastie warrior with a slingshot? I guess that's possible. But I wonder if we're asking the wrong questions. I wonder if it's not just a conversation about historicity and accuracy and did it really happen, or that it's always happening. That when you think of the David and Goliath narrative, maybe it's not about did a little guy prevail while the big guy dies. Is it maybe more important that actually there are days you go about your week or your month or your year and you feel like a David? You feel like you are constantly being beat down or oppressed. You feel like you don't have a voice, or that you long to be something, but there's something much more powerful that constantly keeps you from being that essence, that true ideal of who you are. Or maybe there are days you see yourself as being a David. You wake up and you're waking up to that reality these days, that you realize, wait a minute, maybe I'm not the one being oppressed, maybe I'm the oppressor. You begin to ask these different kinds of questions. And so what the scriptures become for us are not just stories of that we're sort of proving to be true or not true, but maybe they're these stories of how the human and the divine have intersected. That maybe that's what Campbell's also giving us, sort of a modern day version of what it means to be the hero that goes out and learns and discovers new realities amongst deep pain and tension and struggle, and comes back with this sort of new way of seeing reality, a new way of understanding who they are. And maybe at times they're the villain, and maybe at times they're the hero. So if nothing else, if I can look at Campbell's work, and if I can sort of take it in, or look at the story of the scriptures, the Old Testament, the New Testament, it seems to be relatively clear that we are invited into some type of adventure. some type of ideal future, some type of journey that maybe if we stop for just a moment and begin pontificating over, we begin to realize that that can be us as well. That we have this way of looking at our lives that says maybe it's over a period of 4 or 5 or 6 years that we have a dream, a longing to be something, or maybe it's over your entire lifetime, that you want to have an impact, that you feel that maybe you have this sort of almost like a call on your life to be something or to do something or to want to kind of grow into, evolve into some sort of reality that is bigger than yourself, that is of deep consequence. So there's maybe this call to this adventure. I think it's a story of Jesus. I think it's a story of the Pauls. I think it's a story of the Matthews and the Ruths and the different people of the Scriptures. I think it's what the Joseph Campbells are kind of inviting us into. We're invited into this adventure. But I do know this, only from engaging with some of you in this space. You say, well, Scott, the adventure idea, that's not my reality. I'm not invited to adventure right now. I'm just invited into survival. I mean, how am I to see my reality of adventure when I can barely figure out who I am? That I'm in the Campbell story, I'm not a hero, I'm a victim. Because after all, the hero is probably some strong person, relatively good looking, they're probably educated, they're connected, powerful, they might be tall, dark, and handsome, which means they're probably going to be a male. And after all, I don't fit into all those containers and those categories. So when you talk about an adventure, it's not for me. And I'm here to say, well, maybe that's how you feel and that's real. And I'm not here to say that that's not your reality that you're living in right now. But I am here to say that I think this is the beauty and the weight of the work of Jesus. Like the life of how he lived out his reality. I'm not talking about this sort of proverbial just spirit thing, but the real historical Jesus that was around a couple thousand years ago. Because Jesus was constantly rewriting how he saw reality. How he saw what maybe would be a person that would say, I don't have an adventure, I'm barely surviving. He was constantly recentering who the hero was, if I can use Campbell's language. To Jesus, the hero was a short, small tax collector, or those prostitutes, those vulnerable women. It was beat up dudes on the side of the road, blind, deaf, and mute people. Folks who couldn't walk, sinners, non-Jews, and the criminal on the cross next to him. These were the people that Jesus was constantly centering as the hero of the story. These were the people that actually Jesus was saying, I'm inviting you into an adventure, and the adventure is actually rooted and surrounded by you. It's impacted by you. It's marked by you. It's not necessarily the tall and the powerful. It's not the people that we think have resources and they somehow have all the knowledge and all the information and all the power. It's actually those who are on the edges, and Jesus is saying, I'm bringing you to the middle because the conversation is more around you. And it seems to be at least the hero that Jesus is bringing to the surface in terms of Campbell's conversation. He was constantly putting these folks at the center of the conversation and labeling them the hero. And after all, this past week, the Derek Chauvin situations didn't experience a system backing him like it had for most white people that might have been in his circumstance. And again, I'm really cautious how I even speak into this because at one level, I've heard from my friends of color that this week has not necessarily been success, but has been moments of leaning into success or leaning into a different reality. The news this week clearly was centering on siblings of color and celebrated really the work that people have been doing for months since Black Lives Matter, and obviously longer, in terms of keeping the conversation moving forward in such a way that the Derek Chauvins actually are having to pay something for the consequences of what they're doing into people, pulling into people's lives, and what the mark that they're having in a tragic way. And so I reached out to my siblings of color this past week, my friends, and I just sent like a one-line text. How are you doing Tuesday night? How are you doing? And 8 or 9 different people responded with, I heard the word relieved was one of the common words that they said. Anger was another word. One said that I can't respond via text because there's just way too much here to say. That's meaningful. There was a sense that true justice really had not happened, that the system, until it's transformed, is true justice. That's kind of what I also heard. One person even said, hopeful. But that was pretty powerful. So if the hero at the center of the story is the least of these, then maybe it's okay for you to say, all right, I actually maybe am on some kind of journey, that maybe I actually can experience some kind of adventure. I don't always feel that way. I'm not sure that's necessarily how I feel, but maybe today, maybe in this season, maybe right now, for the first time in a long time in our Western reality, the center of the conversation are different people. And I think overall, most of us don't look at our lives in terms of an adventure. We don't look at our lives in terms of a lifetime that's going somewhere to make some kind of dent, some kind of impact. But what if we just nursed that idea this morning? What if we played with that? What if we said, all right, for a moment, I'm going to look at my life in a couple of different ways, maybe in terms of segments and chunks. Like I can look at my life I'm 50, almost 52, and I can look at my life in my 20s and my 30s and my 40s, and I can see very distinct seasons and things happen in those 10-year intervals that were of consequence for me. Some of it I sort of, dare I say, managed and controlled, but so much of it happened to me. But it's been an adventure, to say the least. But if I could oversimplify Campbell's really complex narrative that Sean did a beautiful job of articulating last week, and take the 8 or 9 variables that Campbell talks about in terms of a hero's journey, and if I could condense it down to just a couple of things, a few things, it would be the beginning, middle, and end of your life, right? It would be the vision, lag, and celebration. There's this picture I have of Yosemite, and this is a real life picture of this is absolutely beautiful, it's breathtaking. And where the picture is taken, where you're kind of standing looking at the photograph, you're on top of a mountain, and then you look down into this beautiful valley of trees and clouds, and you're kind of heading towards this other mountain. And so if I could oversimplify a metaphor and beat something to death, I would say the beginning is the vision. This is where we stand right here. The center or the middle or the lag, and I'll explain in a minute what I mean by that, is in the centerpiece. And then the end is this ultimate destination that we're wanting to go. And maybe for most of us, we've spent some time thinking about this. We have this sort of ideal of what a vision of our lives begins to look like. Maybe it's a dream. Maybe it's an anticipated future. And I would ask, what is your ideal vision? What is a better world for you? What does that begin to look like? Is it having a family? Is it a meaningful relationship? Is it to drop 20 pounds? Is it to run a marathon? Is it some education? Escaping poverty? Maybe to start a business? Maybe a new faith journey? I can't tell how many of you I've had a chance to talk with, and this is a huge piece of even why you're here. Maybe one day to have grandchildren. I tell our sons, my wife and I have this conversation all the time, that I am trying to set my future up in such a way that I can chase them around the country. Right? I want to be that kind of parent that shows up in the camper or the van, puts the crapper into the front yard and says, I'm here for 3 months, and we're just kind of hanging out. And if I look at this sort of vision piece, this is something that I guess for so many of us, we don't maybe have one, or so I'm told, because you're sort of in the survival mode. But I'm here to say, actually, maybe Jesus is inviting us specifically into a vision, that the good news that he is extending to us is that you might not see yourself in that space, but actually that's how he's wiring us. For Paul, maybe he would have used this race metaphor, right? I've fought the good fight, I've finished the race, I've kept the faith, as Paul would say in Timothy. Or Jesus says in John 10, I've come that you might have life, and that you might have it with this sense of abundance. And again, Jesus was speaking to whom? The people on the margins, right? And he was inviting them into this sense of abundance. He was inviting them into this journey, into this narrative. And so, but the vision's the easy part. Like, what does he want? What does he long for? That's a relatively easy part, once you figure out what that looks like. The hard part is this center area, this lag part. This might be the most important part of the journey. And so again, here you are. Let's go back to that picture of Yosemite if we can. And you see the forest in the basin space. And so you imagine you're on this mountain range and you're overlooking this forest, and below are these miles of forest that you're going to have to walk through in order to get to the other end, in order to get to that other space. In this book by the name of Todd Henry called Die Empty, he describes the lag as the gap between the cause and the effect. So the cause is sort of like this vision that you have, this beginning, this ideal, and the effect is this end result, this hope to be somewhere, this hope to ultimately arrive to this destination down the road. And I'm trying to think this week, like what would be a good sort of example of maybe cause and effect. And so I thought of my wife is Taryn, the lady that was up here, and she is obsessed with plants, and she recently started growing plants in like a paper towel in a plastic bag. And I think it's how you grow pot too, but I'm not exactly sure. But I know that's not what we're growing, for the record. And it just should be pictures. There it is. These little pictures. They start out like these little dark specks, and then they grow into these plants. And then the next picture, it kind of evolves into this. So this is our back. So every time it drops below 35 degrees, I'm hauling all this crap back in the house, and then it moves to this last picture here. And so this is the corner of our dining room, and we have these beautiful plants that my wife is continuing to work on and loves deeply. But the journey to get to this place is this sort of lag space. It takes seemingly forever. There's all this work that often is not able to be seen. And it's what's happening when we go down into that valley. Give me the Yosemite picture again, if you would, with 3 words on it. If we go back to this Yosemite picture and you see this lag space, when we're down into that space, we really don't know what's happening because we can't see as far as we could see when we're up in the vision space, right? You're down in this middle space where it's the gap between cause and effect. It's this unknown. You can see very little horizon. It's probably going to get worse before it gets better. I remember during COVID, Matt said some really positive things like, man, we've thrived during COVID, and we kind of have-ish, but it's been really hard also. There were times during COVID, I think like any of you, that we sat in that staff space thinking, are we going to make it? Are we going to be a church at the end of this thing? Are people going to believe in this thing long enough to sort of persevere so that we can continue the work that we get to do? And then the Black Lives Matter conversation began to emerge, and it was almost as though, okay, wait a minute, we're refining who we are. We're rediscovering who we are. We're discovering some new work, but nonetheless, this is deeply difficult. This is very hard. This is very challenging. And when you are in this lag space, the only thing that keeps you moving or keeps you going forward is the confidence in your vision and your ability to make it happen. I remember while we were here, like, no, this is too good. We've spent 15 years doing this for it to go away now. In the work that we're getting to do and the people that we're having the privilege of connecting with, and the conversation of who is being centered in the narrative is changing, and it's very important that we continue to do this work. And many of you bought into that, and you've jumped in ever since. That in order to stay the course in this, a willingness to say no to other things, that we found ourselves having to say no to so many other things that during this whole COVID series, and then this sort of daily, diligent, urgent, just kind of moving forward, just progressing. And what we found in all of this, that it was a huge struggle. Like, that's what's happening in that space, right? When you're down in the woods, when you're down in the trees, and you realize, man, it's getting cold down here. It's not like it was up on where the vision was, where it was really clear. And as a matter of fact, I can't even really see the destination anymore because the dark trees and the clouds, and I'm not even exactly sure where I'm going, but I know that there's something out there that I'm longing towards, that I'm moving towards. And so what is that journey for you? What's that begin to look like? I know for many of you, maybe not in this space, but I know many of our folks that have come and gone from Watershed, they've deconstructed their faith, right? They've had this conversation of, I don't think I want any more to do with the church or with this whole Jesus piece or with the story that's connected to anything Christian, and so they walked away. I think what happened is for many of those folks who walked away in that space, like they had this hope that there was a different maybe place to go. There was a different arrival. But instead of doing the hard work and staying the course, they gave up and they walked away, and now they're just like doing yoga in the woods, right? That's what everybody seems to do once they walk away from Christianity. And so now what's happening in this space is we're finding people who are reconstructing. They're saying, no, wait, there's a different way of seeing my connection with God. I don't need to walk away from it. I don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And that's been the journey for many of you. Abraham Maslow said, what one can be, one must be. Like you're wired to be something, and you must become that. There's this journey that we're on, and it's imperative that we continue it. And then ultimately the goal is the celebration, the end, that we've arrived. Like you come out of the woods, you come out of the funk, you come out of the hard work, you come out of the place where it seems oppressive, and when you feel alone, or you feel like there's no way we're going to make it. And I felt so many times we felt that here in the space. I know it's been true for so many of you. You've been alone in your home, or you so desperately want to go back to an office where you can see people and not have to just be in front of a terminal all the time. Or actually, you had to go back to work, and that was exhausting because there was so much threatening reality around your health and what that looked like. But maybe ultimately we find the end result. Like we get there, and we've worked hard at it, and there's a goal, and that we've arrived. And that adventure, while it being difficult, was something worth pursuing. And so I think it's the narrative of Jesus. I think it's the narrative of the New Testament and the Old Testament. It seems to be the modern narrative of what Campbell invites us into, is that we're invited into an adventure. What's that adventure look like for you? What's the beginning, middle, and end? The middle part probably is the most difficult. Celebrate something is easy, right? The kind of the beginning idea, that's easy. It's that middle part that's the hardest. But once we arrive, there's this sense of, we're here. And it's very possible that once you've arrived, you actually are longing a little bit for what was. That middle space, while it was difficult, there were some great stories and some meaningful things that took place there. So what is your adventure? What is the journey that you are on? What's that begin to look like? What's that look like for you and your spouse, or for you and your partner, or for you and your family? What's that look like for you and your small group that you've connected with here? What's that look like for you being a part of the larger narrative that is Watershed? Paul says, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I've kept the faith. Jesus says, I've come that you might have life and have it with abundance. And he wasn't speaking to the powerful. He wasn't speaking to the affluent. He was speaking to those that were on the fringes, those that were on the edges. He was speaking to the prostitutes and the tax collectors and the people that couldn't hear, the people that couldn't see, the people that were not making all the supposed right decisions. And so what's that journey look like for you? What's it like for us as we begin moving forward? I'm going to pray, and I'm going to let you guys go. God, I want to thank you for the opportunity that we are together, physically to be in this space, to leave this space reminded that we are on an adventure, that we have this opportunity to do life together, that we have this opportunity to celebrate our connection with you in this space, maybe through music, through connection, through conversations, through these talking sermon variables. And we look forward to the days ahead. We look forward to larger gatherings where we get to connect more with our siblings here at Watershed in a way where maybe we can even hug one day and shake hands and be the community that we were a year ago. Christ, we love you, and we look forward to our days ahead. Amen. Thank you, Watershed, for being with us this morning. Love you guys. If you're new, we'd love to connect with you outside the steps, and thanks for your time this morning.